life of the United States. We are against the imperialists in charge of power in Washington. Simón Bolívar, our libertador, said in 1826, and he was almost like a prophet. The United States of North America seemed to be destined by fate to be a scourge to us, to bring hunger and misery in the name of freedom. 1826, Simón Bolívar. He was like a prophet. How could he see so early on what was going to happen in the next century, the 20th century? So, as I say, President Donald Trump and I certainly have our differences, but that is what we have to dialogue about. It's only if there are differences in the world, then you have to act with goodwill, and you have to keep your word. You have to discuss these things. Donald Trump said he was worried about Venezuela. He wanted to help Venezuela. Good. I stand ready to talk with an open agenda on everything that he might wish to talk about with the United States government. Openly, sincerely, honestly. As president of the non-aligned movement, we believe in the dialogue of civilizations. We believe in the non-aligned movement, and we constantly encourage international dialogue in order to resolve international disputes by reaching agreements through dialogue, by peaceful means, politically, not by force. Venezuela has a lot of experience in dialoguing. For example, in OPEC, we've had to deal with a lot of different views and been able to reach agreements and consensus. We've had a meeting with Algeria, with the OPEC monitoring group. It was an extraordinary meeting, and my country is part of that monitoring group. And the representatives of 24 states and the major oil consumers and producers. Now you can just imagine all the enormous cultural, political and strategic geopolitical differences of views. And yet we came out of that meeting with one voice, with a consensus as to how to handle the oil market with fair and stable and reasonable prices. So there is a way of getting to solutions. There is a way of settling disputes. The Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela had a very hard time of it. The founder of our revolution, Chavez, the Comandante, who will always be held dear in the hearts of the Venezuelan people, said on behalf of the people that he appreciated the fact that they supported the revolution and it was a peaceful one. He believed in international dialogue, and he confirmed our will for political will at the international level. But there are governments represented here in this chamber who speak of sovereignty, independence, who respect the sovereignty and integrity of Venezuela. And I appreciate anybody that wants to help us from Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, that they respect the sovereignty of our country. They do not want to interfere in the internal affairs of Venezuela. And they are supporters of us in a sovereign dialogue for peace, justice, for the future, for prosperity of Venezuela, our noble nation that deserves peace and that wants to preserve its culture. So good news is what I bring you. For a country which has never been brought to its knees, I bring you good news from a nation that has been consolidating its democracy. Good news from a country that is empowering its people. Good news from a country that is building its own social model, its own kind of democracy, to protect the old people, the young people, the children, the women, and those that need help, the working people. I bring from them all good news for you, because we will be able to restore our economy. We introduced a program for economic recovery in August, which is now re-establishing the foundation for a new economy which will not just depend on oil money, but rather it's a sustainable development growth, so that we can have sustainable prosperity. And this is a new kind of social economy. We believe in another world is possible. Our generation has seen a lot. We've seen the coming and the ending of the bipolar world. We've seen the end of the Cold War. And it seems that some people want to bring it back by issuing a tax on China and Russia and Venezuela. But this is a struggle. There is a struggle against Russia and China, but this is really contrary to what should be an international humanistic policy, which sees that we are now in a multipolar world, no longer a bipolar, unipolar world. Venezuela is proposing that we build a multipolar world where there are lots of different centers, where Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, Europe, Northern America, where all of us can live together in peace and justice, respecting the culture and the religion and the idiosyncrasies and the identities and the ways of life and the economies and the policies of each other. There is not one single economic model. You cannot impose a single economic model or way of thinking on everyone. You cannot impose a single cultural model or pattern on everybody. You cannot do this. You can't make everybody the same. You have to acknowledge cultural diversity throughout the world. And that is why we advocate the coming of this new world, the world of the non-aligned movement, a world of justice. Justice. And we would like to declare our solidarity with the Arab people of Palestine. Justice must come to Palestine. There must be respect for its historic territory. This was acknowledged in 1967 in the United Nations. And we raise the flag of the Palestinian people along with our own. We support the appeal of the United Nations for an end to the 50-year-long illegal blockade against Cuba. It's time for it to be ended. It's really an anachronism. It dates back to an old age. Now it seems they want to impose such a blockade against other peoples, for example, the Venezuelan peoples. But we call for implementation of United Nations resolutions. There's going to be a resolution coming up for a vote to put an end to the blockade against Cuba. We support it. We believe it must be immediately lifted. We have a world to build. We have a world that we must make. "200 years ago, our continent was full of colonies. We lacked justice. 100 years ago, we fought for liberty, for freedom. Today, in the 21st century, the time has come. And certainly, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, following on the revolutionary ideas of Simón Bolívar and the ideas of Comandante Chavez, and his voice can still be felt here, can still be heard here in this chamber, calling for justice. Justice, he wanted a world where justice prevailed, an end to imperialist practices and threats, an end to coercion and extortion against our peoples. Today, we can say that we have had 20 years of our revolution, and the most recent years have been the most difficult. There have been attacks against us, and on the 26th of